February meeting of the Rules and City Government Committee to order. Please note for the record, both Alderman Arnett and Alderman Savage are present. First item is approval of the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Next item, approval of the minutes from the January 14th meeting.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes from the 14th, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Appointments and reappointments to committees. AP 920, the appointment of Joe Lucchese to the Arts and Public Places Committee. Ms. Raftovich.
Hi, Hillary Raftovich, Constituent Services Officer. I am here to speak on behalf of Mr. Lucchese because I sent his notification email to the wrong address, so he has no idea that he's supposed to be here. I'm sure you've looked at his resume, as you were commenting on it earlier, he has a very impressive resume. He was recommended to the city by a group of artists here that served on the transition team for arts. This was their recommendation, and I think he would be an excellent addition to Arts and Public Places.
Have you been in touch with him at all, or just not to inform him of this meeting?
Not since he's been appointed. The appointment notification was the one that got sent to the wrong address.
But that he is aware that he
was recommended and he submitted, yes.
And he has...
But he's not aware that the mayor has actually appointed him.
Okay, but he is willing and...
Yeah, he was then, and we'll make sure he is before he comes before council.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Raftovich about Mr. Lucchese's resume? It is rather extensive.
Rather.
Hearing no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we recommend approval to the council.
Second that motion.
Okay, the motion is to recommend the appointment of Mr. Joe Lucchese to the Arts and Public Places Commission. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Next item is legislation before the committee. 03419, Planning and Zoning Appeal Procedures. Alderman Arnett.
So we're continuing to have maneuvers on the appeal of the Eastport Shopping Center, which means that I am continuing to not be able to have a conversation with Mr. Gallagher until we're clear of that. So I will probably have to ask for another postponement at the council meeting. I don't want to move forward without having that discussion with him. And so I'm waiting.
I noticed, and Dr. Nash is in the audience, Dr. Nash wrote a P&Z staff opinion. Is there any comment you'd like to make at this point?
Staff opinion or recommendation?
Or a recommendation, I'm
Right.
sorry. And how do you feel
Good
about us
afternoon.
continuing postponement, actually?
I think that's a good idea to touch base with the chair of the Board of Appeals. This staff report is my report to Planning Commission and their findings. And so they made they had a few amendments that they wanted to put forward for the legislation. So I think Alderman Arnett was going to look at those when he talked to the chair of the Board of Appeals.
Yes, so I'm sympathetic, appreciated their comments. I think Bob does too. I just want to be absolutely certain. The outstanding thing is I'm recommending that we go from a de novo hearing to a hearing on the record, which means that we don't have to represent the whole application all over again. The appeals board, the appellant, and the others involved in it would use what the record that had been built on an application through the recommendations from the planning staff. a constituent, Jim, why am I blanking on his name? Conlon, has said that he feels that somehow going to the record would take away from the community's ability to appeal or have some other right. I can't fathom it. I did talk to Heidi Hollick, who is a lawyer in Ward 8 that's become quite active, and I think that she thinks it's okay too, but I really wanted to have that sit down. I'm not interested in taking away any right of citizens to be heard, but so I just want to be crystal clear on that.
And this shows my ignorance of legal language, but I'm looking at the Planning Commission's recommendation under their analysis, and they say they prefer on the record rather than de novo.
Right.
So what is the difference? From what I just gathered from what you said, de novo is on the record.
No. De novo means that basically there is no record. You hear it all anew.
Okay.
De novo. So it doesn't make any difference whatever testimony or any kind of hearing they heard in front of the planning staff or the planning commission, if it's one of the ones that goes to them. Although I don't think you can appeal a planning commission to the Board of Appeals anymore. I did like that. Can you appeal from the planning commission decision to the Board of Appeals?
I'm not sure how that is when we change the major
Yeah,
site
I think
design.
we made it so you had to go right to the circuit court from the planning commission, which I would like to go back and undo. Going to circuit court is expensive. And the whole purpose of having one of the major purposes for having the citizen boards, both the commission and the Board of Appeals, is so that citizens can be heard by peers in a relatively inexpensive setting. Now, the appeal of the shopping center puts the lie to that, because I think tens of thousands of dollars of legal fees have been expended as things have become more and more legalistic. But still, the theory is that you have one stop before you get involved in the whole legal system. Pretty much have to have a legal counsel or even a legal team. So, so on the record means that they don't have to bring in all of the drawings and the models and all of those things, and the applicant basically represent their case, which is pretty much what happened in the appeal on the Eastport Shopping Center.
The shopping center went right to the Board of Appeals because it did not go to Planning Commission, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Oh, may I? Or you still?
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I would second that motion in terms of the having it go. I think some more of our decision to go to the Board of Appeals, especially now that I think we should talk about it at some point, because we are sending more projects to the Planning Commission. But in any case, I'll save that for another day. I think what I would request, Madam Chair, is maybe when this comes back to us, and Ms. Green, can we maybe have somebody from the law office to talk more about? I'd like to hear their recommendation in terms of de novo or on the record. If there are
I'm
any
surprised somebody's not here. Usually,
implications to it, but we can. I'd have to wait on that.
Do you want to try to get someone here, or for the next?
No,
when it
because we're
comes
not.
back?
I don't
Okay.
have.
Yeah.
I pretty much am going to go with what the Planning Commission is recommending. I just want to make sure Bob wants to go with that too. Joelle will now be the person working with planning staff and the Planning Commission, the Boards of Appeals, representing the staff, not so at the Board of Appeals, he would be sitting at the staff table, and then Mady Smith. And then who's the guy that comes when she doesn't?
Ben Henry.
Pardon me?
Ben Henry?
Ben?
No,
Henry?
it was somebody else, because he's got a twin brother. He was the first person that I was going to get counsel from when I was bringing my appeal on the density calculation. I can't think of his name. He's got a twin brother. They're both lawyers, and they're both one's land use, one isn't. Anyway, way off to the side there.
So Alderman, would you like to make a motion to postpone action
Yes.
on 034-19?
Yes, I move postponing action. The Board of Appeals, they're being asked for reconsideration, right? By
Yes, a motion to reconsider.
right, and that's later this month,
March 3rd, I believe.
March 3rd. Okay.
So what are they motioning to reconsider? Their opinion?
Yeah, I think they're saying that the board doesn't have the right to remand back to the staff. They either have to, because it is a de novo, they have to either accept, reject, or modify, but they can't remand back to the staff,
Which is what they did.
which is what they did. I don't know why, because that means, it almost means that it's going to go to circuit court. Going to circuit court adds all kinds of time to it. I frankly, and I think we can talk about this, I think that most of the reasons for them remanding it back are very repairable. In fact, I was talking to Joel this morning, and a lot of the standards that was alleged weren't there are there and were posted online. And so I think it's technically, a lot of these things are technically correct to be sent back. So, for example, from Public Works, they'll have to be more elaborate than two sentences. They'll say, according to the standards, we feel that it's satisfactory. So a lot of it, I think how police does theirs is a little more questionable. I think the traffic one might be, but primarily I think sending it back is just saying, go back and dot the I's and cross the T's. So for me, it seems like it's so close to being repaired. Why send it on to circuit court? But I'm not the applicant, and they have a lawyer who's well known in town, and that's their business. But anyway, so when they have that hearing, my presumption is that will be done enough so that Bob and I can sit down. And remember, the whole impetus for me writing this legislation was the question of the procedure for that whole Board of Appeals hearing.
So are you postponing this until a date certain or a time certain, meaning when the Planning Commission has?
So remember, at council, we postponed consideration of this until the 6th of March.
Right.
Unless Bob and I can get together and get things nailed down with the Office of Law, the 4th or 5th or 6th, and we'll probably be coming to the council and saying postpone to the second meeting in March. And so that would be, so if we can do something and postpone to the second meeting in March, we'll have the next rules committee. So presumably we can deal with it in rules, send it on for the agenda for the second meeting in March.
So is your motion to postpone this until the second meeting of March?
Now, my motion for us is to postpone it until our next meeting of the rules committee.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Green, would you make sure that someone from the Office of Law is here for that meeting, please? Thank you, Dr.
I would
Nash.
invite you to my meeting with Bob Gallagher, but we would constitute a quorum.
Yeah, well, two people can't ever meet.
Ever, anytime.
Ever.
Even at McGarvey's.
Well, we're not making policy there, at least nothing that impacts the city. Okay, the next item is 03819, Housing and Community Development Committee, for the purpose of renaming the Housing and Community Development Committee, clarifying certain powers and functions, and making stylistic changes. I'm a little disappointed that neither of the sponsors are here. to help us understand.
I'm actually pleased that one of them isn't here. I think I got his cold, but
Oh, please.
Oh, no.
And I'm sitting between the two of you. You know, I cannot be infected in the next 8 days.
Yeah.
But do you all have any,
I mean,
I
this.
do have some thoughts on this one. But,
okay, Alderman Savage?
let's see. This is the one that sets up. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So I looked at the staff report, and there were a number of. They weren't really substantive per se, just kind of clarifications that came from the city manager, and I don't think I took all of them, but I took some of them and passed them. Asked the law office to draft some amendments, and so when we get to that point, but otherwise, I would like to hear what the rest of the committee thinks in terms of the basic merits of the underlying legislation.
I mean, to me, this is stylistic. I mean, it's a matter of. It has more meaning, I think, to the sponsors than it does to me. But if they want to do that, I don't have any problem with it.
Well, the only issue that was of concern to me is the piece that deals with the quorum. Currently, I guess it's 3 people that constitute a quorum, of whom 2 of them must be aldermen. In this legislation, 4 would constitute a quorum with only 1 alderman as part of that. And I'm not sure the reasoning behind reducing the alderman's impact on this committee. I think it would make sense if you're going to change the quorum to 4, that we would still keep 2 aldermen and you'd still have 2 citizens. And I don't know whether you all have any answers to
Isn't
that.
it the primary driver of this, Teresa Wellman? I mean, isn't this largely a meeting with Teresa to
Well,
go over the programs that she administers?
I guess.
I mean, that's what it's been historically.
Yeah, Teresa does man this
Why do we
committee.
keep sending Sally to the back room? Why
I
can't
know, why
she
don't
just
you
stay up
stay
here with us?
Alderman Savage?
Yeah, there were some, I was reminded that the city attorney, the law office, new city attorney did raise a number of concerns with this legislation, and I think it might be good to hear from the law office at some point. They're in court today.
So they're not available today? Dr. Nash, are you aware, first of all, the question was raised about Ms. Wellman staffing this committee and the programs that they impact are under her leadership.
That's right. She staffs the committee, and then they oversee specifically who we give the CDBG grant money to, in addition to other things. But that is one of their main tasks. But it probably would be good, as Alderman Savage mentioned, to also get law input on this one, because there were the new city attorney did have some questions about the makeup of this board and some aspects of the legislation.
Okay.
So we postpone till, I move we postpone until we can get the Office of Law here. Should we also ask Teresa to come?
I think we should.
And maybe by that time, the one alderman will be back and the other will be mended, and we can ask them to come.
Are they both on the Housing Committee?
Yes,
I think so.
everyone on the Housing and Human Welfare Committee is also on that.
Who's the 3rd alderman? Because there's only 2 sponsors.
Well, it's Ellie, wasn't it?
It's Alderman Gay,
Rodriguez.
Alderman Rodriguez, and sorry, because we rarely have it.
Must be
Is
Alderman
it
Tierney?
Tierney?
Tierney.
I think there has been a problem making the quorum at times with the 2 aldermanic requirement.
Okay. Well, I think somebody needs to be here to speak Alderman?
Well, I think, well, would you want to discuss some of the amendments? Because, again, they're just some corrective. We could get this out of the way if you want today, regardless of what the city attorney would say. And these did come from the city. It came from the city manager, and then I asked the law office to draft. And they're kind of just corrective anyway, but I'll leave it up to y'all.
I mean, they're your amendments, so we can speak to your amendments,
Yeah.
but I would rather we hold off taking action until we hear from the Office of Law.
Okay.
Unless you know what, I mean, if your amendments address the issues from the Office of Law.
No, these are just more corrections.
Okay.
Clarification. They didn't really alter the substance.
Okay, so we can address your amendments if you'd like.
Okay.
But with the understanding that we're not going to take a final action until we hear from the Office of Law.
Yeah. Okay. So the First Amendment simply corrects the name, removes Annapolis Housing Authority and changes it to Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis Board of Commissioners. Just a correction there. And then Amendment 2 removes some redundant information that was inserted in legislation dealing with,
Oh,
Hello.
you must have heard us calling your name.
So Amendment 2 just strikes a section that states that the committee is subject to the Open Meetings Act. That's implied. We don't have to state that again in the code. Let me see. Amendment 3, again, just a change in the language there from unanimous consent to majority vote. Amendment 4 is just substituting some of the language. I don't think this changes the substance, though.
Is that Ms. Wellman's title, the Chief of Community Development?
I don't know if Mr. Laws has any clarifying information on these amendments, but I know they were drafted by Ms. Lee.
Yes, let me just take a look at it. My assistant city attorney is bringing up the actual ordinance because I didn't have a problem with the amendments and the things that were being altered here. I was talking or advising about some things about the general function of the committee that might be problematic. Again, just trying to make sure we keep the separation between executive functions and legislative functions. And for instance, one of the provisions had the legislators, which are included on the committee, actually carrying out some housing activities, which might be in violation of the charter. So I wanted to just get the ordinance to kind of tell you what I was thinking in that regard. But these amendments were fine with me.
Okay.
Amendment 4, number 2, management of and any improvements to the housing stock in the city. Do we have a housing stock that Ms. Wellman manages?
Well, indirectly, she helps fund programs that improve housing stock, do facade improvements and other things like that. And we work with Habitat for Humanity and other programs.
Doesn't she also keep track of the MPDUs?
Yes, she does, in partnership with the county.
Okay, and then there's another program where we give money to particularly elderly to help them renovate or do improvements or something, and I don't remember what program that is. But
We work with the county's ACDS agency to do property rehabilitation to provide those services.
and that's through ACDS?
Yes. And we sometimes do it on our own as well, not as frequently, but on occasion we will.
Okay. All right, so you finished with your amendments? Are
Yeah.
you ready?
The amendments are fine, but I guess I'm wondering, is there any possibility that when law comes back and looks at it, that some of these amendments will be obviated or changed in some way?
Well, do you want to hold off until Mr. Lyles has had an opportunity to? He had just said that he's okay with these amendments.
Oh, okay, well then,
Isn't that what I understood you to
Yes,
say?
Okay.
the amendments are fine.
Are you on the
Things-
mic, Mr. Lyles?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
The amendments are fine. The issue I had was in the substance of the duties of the committee. To the extent that there were aldermen and women on the committee.
Okay, can we hold that thought just
Yes.
for one moment?
Yep.
So we can dispatch with these amendments?
I second the motion to approve the amendments from the Rules Committee.
Okay, these are the Savage amendments.
Correct.
As
Well, they're
they're
now
listed.
the Rules Committee.
So they will become after we take action on it. Okay. So all in favor of the Savage amendments, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so now they become the Rules Committee amendments. Okay, Mr. Lyles?
Yes, ma'am. I was looking at the members, 3 members of the Housing and Human Welfare Committee of the City Council, which by implication means that the city council members would be in the position of planning and implementing housing and community development projects.
Where are you in the
I'm
legislation?
looking at paragraph C. If you, so on the amendment, the things that were not changed that I had some question about are in paragraph C.
Okay,
These are-
this is
these
on
were-
page 2 of the legislation?
Yes,
Line
exactly.
33.
Okay, line 23,
Line 24
24.
to 25 and 26. So basically, when you use the word implement, plan is fine, maybe, and exercise all the powers and functions of redevelopment and urban renewal, we start to go down a path where council members are actually carrying out executive functions, which are the purview of the mayor and city manager by charter. And we just want to make sure that we continue to maintain that buffer between things that could bring individual council members into issues where executive functions are more or less implicated. For instance, right now,
committee meeting.
implementing housing community development projects could be
In a committee meeting.
at some future time involving HACA, right? And the plaintiffs in the case brought in the executive function by suing the mayor. And this appears to be putting council members in the way of litigation when it's unnecessary. They wouldn't normally sue council members because you don't do executive things. You don't inspect the properties. You don't deny people licenses and things like that, which is great. And so just to make sure that you continue